Okay, in the new episode of Denim and Leather Podcast, it's a special honor for me because I'm a drummer and our next guest is drummer. Joe Franco from Good Rats, Vinnie Moore, Leslie West, Widowmaker and more. Hi Joe, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Great, thank you for accepting my invitation for the podcast.
No problem.
I'm amazed because I don't have many drummers until now, in the podcast, in the episodes. So first I wanted to ask you, how did you start with music back in the 60s, 70s? When did you start?
Yeah, 60s. Well, like most people my age, Beatles, Stones, Never forget the first time I saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. It started there. And then the whole British invasion, Dave Clark 5 and, all those bands of that era, the Animals. I started playing by playing along with Ringo, and when I really got totally into drumming was the second British invasion, which I call Hendrix and Cream and Who. That to me, that really did it, because those drummers, Keith Moon and Ginger Baker and Mitch Mitchell, they really made me want to play and improve as a musician. So I got totally into that through the rest of the 60s. Then in the 70s, the next level seemed to be the Tony Williams and Billy Cobham and all the fusion music. So I was kind of like a rock drummer, but a little bit of a rock snob once that era launched, and I was listening to a lot more of Tony Williams and Billy Cobham than I was, who was out, Black Sabbath or, Deep Purple. I love Deep Purple. I love Ian Pace. He's one of my favorites. But, I evolved as drumming evolved, although my real roots were rock, and the bands I played with were rock bands. Good Rats were my first band that I recorded with, 74. But I was with that band from 72 to 82, 10 years. So, and then from there, just evolved, evolved.
The Good Rats had your career like this, right? So you made it with them.
My launch pad.
Yeah.
Because in those days, you ever see the Twisted movie, the Twisted Sister movie?
Yes, of course, I'm a huge fan,
Okay, so if you saw that movie, it really went into great detail of the old bar days.
Yeah.
In the 70s, in the New York area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state, they call it.
Yeah.
And that was a huge movement. I mean, you can play 2,000 to 3,000 people a night and drive home, and play, you could play maybe once a month, at each club, not even once a month, once every 3 months we used to play clubs, that's how many clubs there were.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you made enough money to live off of that and to come back 3 months in every club. Yeah.
Yeah, we did really well. What we would do with Good Rats, we'd make a record, tour for 3 months, and then we'd come home and play this lucrative club circuit while we wrote material for the next record. And then we would do that again, and you go out and try to break new ground. And, we had pockets all over the world, but we were pretty much a tri-state band, Everywhere else, it was more of a cult band. But New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, if you grew up in that era, you saw the Good Rats.
Yeah. How did you sign to a label back with Good Rats? How did you get albums so fast in the 70s? I know Twisted Sister were struggling to sign a deal. It was not
we were very lucky in that we always did our own material And fortunately, through local radio stations playing our demos, we built a lot of traction, and record companies became aware that these guys are getting airplay already. You know, in the United States, back in those days, you'd get airplay all over the country before you got airplay in New York. New York was the hardest market to get airplay. And we were getting played on the radio in New York. So labels were like, you know, wow, this is, you know, we got signed by Warner Brothers in '74, and they wanted us to be the East Coast Doobie Brothers. You know, like a tougher, more street version, but with hit songs, you know. And that was their quote. I mean, that's what they told us when we went, and literally when we went and signed, they said, "You're going to be our East Coast Doobie Brothers." But you know, it didn't go as planned. And you know, rock and roll, it's bumpy. And we wound up changing labels a bunch of times. You know, we got into a good groove around 78, 79. When Arista was distributing the label we were on. We were on Passport Records, distributed by Arista. And we had a good groove going there. That's probably when we were at our peak, the very end of the 70s.
Yeah, your Goodrat's labeling stuff and career reminds me of the band Angel. They had also a few albums and were successful, but you never made it like top in the world, you know, like...
Yeah, we didn't have... It's really great when you can have a label behind you. And back in those days, you know, if you were on Warner Brothers, you're going to put a record out every year, get tour support. But we didn't have that, you know. Long story short, we were signed by the West Coast division of Warner Brothers. After the East Coast passed on us. So there was always that friction. So we never really had the whole machine behind us, and we got after the first year, you know. We had our producer picked out and everything for the second album. Jack Richardson, who did Guess Who, Alice Cooper. He was going to do our second record, and it just never happened.
Okay, so after Goodrat's in '82 until '86, you joined '86 Twisted Sister, right?
Yeah, between then and Twisted, I did a tour with a Canadian band called Chilliwack at the end of '82. And then in '83, I took the time out to write a drum book, something I always wanted to do. And it was probably the best thing I ever did, because the drum company I was with at the time, Premier, they would send me out to NAMM shows and all these Percussive Art Society shows, and I got to play and make a name for myself through the strength of the book, you know, because there weren't a lot of rock drummers who were educators. And then, of course, you know, with all the metal bands coming out, everyone wanted to play double bass, so it was a popular topic. And so it was good timing. That came out in '84. And then between then and Twisted, I played in different bands, like I had a European band actually called Hammerhead. Ian Parry and Wilco van Beek, they lived in Holland. They were the main two writers in the band. And David Rosenthal from Rainbow, he produced the album. And I thought that was going to be my ticket, because it was very much in the Van Halen bag, and I thought that band was going to be huge. At the same time, I did a record with this gal named Fiona. It's '86. And that record wound up getting the big tour. So I wound up touring with Fiona in '86. We did a Bryan Adams tour, and that was the summer that he had Summer of '69 and Heaven and
the Reckless album.
Exactly, Reckless. Yeah. So we were playing big arenas, and it was very cool. In '86, AJ left Twisted, and I was always very good friends with those guys. They were close friends of mine. So it seemed like I'd be a natural call, but it just so happened that I was coming out of this drum shop, which is across the street from a recording studio in Long Island, and I see Mendoza and JJ in the parking lot. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And they said, well, we're doing some demos to our new record. You want to come in? Dee's here, the whole gang's here. I said, yeah, let me come in, And so I don't know if I ever told this whole story before, so this will be fun. I go into the control room, and they're doing demos, because AJ had left the band. They're doing demos with a drum machine.
Yeah.
And I was familiar with drum programming. Drum programming was not a foreign to me. I did, at the time, I was doing records with some big pop artists. Anyway, so long story short, I'm tapping the sounds. I'm saying, wow, these are pretty wimpy sounds for a metal band. And they were like, you do this? You program? I said, yeah. So next day they were over at my studio in my house, and we were putting demos together for Love Is for Suckers.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the demo sounded so good that the producer heard them and said, drums are done. So those are the drums you hear on Love Is for Suckers,
That's what I wanted to ask you. Is all the drums programmed on the Love Is for Suckers?
It's the demos.
Here is the album here. You see it?
I do see it. Yeah, it's the demo. So that backfired on me.
But
it was all good. It was Bo Hill, and at the time, every record he was producing, he was using machines. Even the second Fiona record where he produced, I played drums on 6 songs, and then he said, "I'm going to bring in a programmer because we want these 4 songs to have programmed drums." And that kind of got me into it. I blame Bo for my drum programming skills, because when I kind of got kicked off of 4 songs from the Fiona record, I said, all right, I'll learn to program. I'll get into this. And I really got into programming, and it was kind of fun stuff, because in those days it was new. There was the Linn drum that everyone had, and it all sounded the same. But then this SP12 came out, and you could put your own sounds into the unit, and that's what got me hooked on it. Yeah. So that led to all this stuff, and I wound up helping them out with their demos. And then of course I probably said, well, so I said to Dee, so who's drumming on the next record? And he and I'm pointing to myself,
Yeah.
And he said, well, I don't know, because we're kind of the same age,
Yeah.
He goes, I don't know, we're thinking of getting like some young guy, maybe a younger guy. And I said, why, to make you guys look old? That's just a funny line that I'll always remember, And so anyway, so long story short, we put that thing together, and but I didn't actually. It wasn't like I was the drummer. I was still helping him out with the demos. But he was doing a band called. He was producing a band called Envy at the time, ENVY. 2 sisters, guitar player, singer, kind of like Heart kind of thing. And he hired me to play drums on that record. So I don't know, maybe he was kind of feeling me out, before committing to the Twisted thing. So I played drums on Envy. And it's while we were recording that record, he told me that this might be his last record with Twisted, because he really wanted to put a new band together, and he'd like me to play drums in the new band, which 5 years later became Widowmaker. That's a really long story.
Yeah. I remember an interview with you where you said, if you do something after this today, I want to be your drummer, like something like that. We gotta do something together.
Yeah, well, he actually initiated it, and he said he wanted to put a band together.
Yeah.
To this day, those are 2 of my favorite records I played on. Those 2 Widowmaker records.
Man, you play with no mercy there. It the best double drums, the best feelings. I don't know. I love it. I love it.
Those are 2 of my favorite records. But it was tough. It was kind of like from a marketing standpoint, selling an 80s rock star in the 90s, you know?
Yeah.
When you know, Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and all that stuff was the hip stuff coming out and sounded fresh, and we were clumped into the hair band, you know.
Yeah.
Which, of course, we weren't.
But with the second record, Stand By for Pain, you did a little bit of alternative, darker metal, a little bit more like.
Yeah, well, you know, you're always influenced by what you hear, and you're perceptive. You picked up on that. Yeah, it was totally a reflection of hearing Stone Temple Pilots and hearing what was going on.
Yeah,
and I liked it. You know, I love Soundgarden. It's just that it was hard to market us, you know, because people were still thinking of us as, you know, Twisted Sister or you know, a offshoot of Twisted Sister, because it was still Dee singing, you know, and Dee sings amazing on those records, you know. And the first one was more like an 80s rock record, and the second one was more like a 90s rock record. But I thought they were both really good, and the band really smoked live.
I think you also were preparing a third record, but never happened, right?
We were.
You were working on a third record, but never happened, right? With Widowmaker.
Both records.
With Widowmaker. No, on a third record.
Oh no, we didn't do a third record.
No, but were you working on it?
No.
No.
When we disbanded after the second tour, that was it. We did not write more material.
Okay. That's about the time when you opened your studio, right? Your Beat Street studio in '95, right?
Well, yeah. There was, after Twisted, I did a bunch of cool things where I started playing with a lot of guitar players. I did a couple of records with Vinnie Moore. I did a couple of records with Blue Saraceno, and I did a record with Leslie West and Jack Bruce. And we actually toured. When we toured with Timmy Bogert on bass.
Tim Bogert,
and, that was, you know, a very productive time for me in the late 80s, because besides doing all of the rock, the guitar player, the shredder records, I was also still programming, and I wound up landing, you know, albums with Mariah Carey and Celine Dion and Taylor Dane and Diana Ross. I was doing a lot of those diva records, and at the same time, I'm playing with these proggy guitarists, you know.
Yeah.
So that was pretty fun time for me. Beat Street started after Widowmaker.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, well, it just happened. It was a perfect time for me, because I met my wife, which was the greatest thing for my life. And we started having kids, and you didn't want to go on the road, you know. Yeah. And Beat Street started by just taking my gear from my drum room in my loft, which became a baby's room, and finding a place to park it, you know. And then I had the drum studio with Jonathan Mover, and we closed that. So I took my drums, my gear, and put a place together so I can play on people's records, you know.
Yeah, and you did a studio.
Yeah, studio, and it then grew into a second studio, into a third studio. You know, now I'm still doing it 30 years later.
Yeah, so now you have like a production company, right?
Yeah, we're pretty much audio post, you know, so everything you hear in the TV show, from sound effects, music, Foley footsteps, and, you know, everything you hear, we start with the dialogue with animated series, you know, and all the dialogue goes to the animators. They send it to us back. We put in music, sound effects, and mix it for television. 5.1. We now do Dolby Atmos. You know, it's a pretty sophisticated production facility.
And now you pretty much have like a mini cinema at home, right? I mean, in the studio, right?
Yeah, yeah, and basically, thanks to COVID, I can run it remotely. The work from home thing has become so common, you know.
Yeah.
I sit here in my drum room and I look at my laptop, make sure the emails, everything's together, and you know, it makes it easy to run because I'm not really a hands-on guy. I have great engineers that work for me, and I just pretty much put the teams together when we get a new show. You know, make a deal, put the team together. Oversee the first couple of episodes until things are rolling, you know. And it's fun. It's rewarding because a lot of it's children's television. At the end of the day, you're helping kids. It's a real feel-good thing, you know.
Yeah. So you are working on a lot of TV series, right? Series and animated series and movies. And
Yeah, we do work with Sesame Street. We do Blue's Clues, which is a really big show in the U.S. And currently we're doing a show for Apple TV and a show for Disney Junior. They're going to be coming out early 25, January, February, somewhere in there.
Awesome. That's unbelievable. That's so your production studio in 30 years went from recording studio to something more, to a big.
Yeah, we started out as just music, you know. And I was very lucky to get asked to play drums on a children's television show back in the late '90s. A show called Between the Lions. You can find it on YouTube. You could find all the music and all the animated skits. And it was just amazing because I got to play all these different styles, you know. We'd be playing rock one song, country, Motown, you know, stuff that nobody would hire me to play, you know. So I got to really, you know, have fun as a drummer. But it seemed like as time went on, everyone had their own music studio at home nowadays, you know, garage band and a computer, you know. So we got into post. We got more into mixing because, you know, music is my life, right? But music is one element. You know, there's dialogue, which is more important than the music. You know, without dialogue, there's no story. You know, and there's sound design, sound effects. There's footsteps. If it's an animated series, there's environment. There's atmosphere. You're in a park. There should be birds. You're in the city. Car, all this stuff has to go into putting a show together. That became really interesting to me. I wanted to do the whole thing. Music was only this much of it. I wanted to do, you know, and so over the years, we started by the late '90s, early 2000s. We were doing the whole package.
Awesome. That's awesome. Do you still record music in your studio for some famous artists?
We do. I mean, we had, you know, we mixed that U2 show in Paris that they did right COVID time, before COVID actually, when they had that shooting. They had some kind of a terrorist thing in Paris about. I'm telling you, the years.
That was the Queens of the Stone Age concert, I think.
Yes, exactly. That and so we mix that. Foreigner comes in to mix once in a while, do overdubs. When they had that big anniversary tour with Lou Gramm and the original keyboard player and Ian McDonald, they came in to do some fixes and, you know, so we do some music stuff, you know. But a lot of times shows don't have the budget to do live music like what we do now. So we have composers that pretty much phone it in. You know, they FTP us the music and we mix it in the show. So, you know, I'm not like actually playing drums on it, you know, like it was when we started, you know. But I did do music, you know, in that studio. There were, you know, like albums that I did as a drummer at Beat Street while we were doing television shows, you know. I did a prog rock band called Magellan.
Okay,
did two
I know.
records with them. I did a record with Kansas, Steve Walsh,
Yeah.
the singer and writer in Kansas. I actually produced and played on Eddie Ojada's solo record.
Oh, Axis to Axis. Yeah.
Yeah, that was done at Beat Street, and I played on it and produced it with Eddie.
Great sound.
Yeah, and then with D, I did Van Helsing's Curse, that goth rock orchestra.
Yeah.
We did that at Beat Street. The whole record was done there.
That was awesome.
Yeah. So but right now what pays the bills is audio post.
Yeah.
Not music.
Yeah.
So
while we're still at the music side, how was working? You mentioned Vinnie Moore and Leslie West. How was working with them back in the early?
They're all, everybody's different. Vinnie Moore. He saw me play at a NAMM show. In fact, it was probably could have been '88. And I used to play in the premier drum booth at the NAMM show out in Anaheim. And he was going to do his second record. Tommy Aldridge played on the first, right? He was going to do a second record with Terry Bozzio, and Terry didn't want to rehearse. Terry doesn't have to rehearse. But that made Vinnie really uptight about feeling insecure about going into the studio without rehearsing,
Yeah.
And so he asked me if I was available. So I was like, yeah, I'll rehearse as much as you want. So we did a record called Time Odyssey. And it was very much in that neoclassical Yngwie Malmsteen at the time bag. We did it in Philadelphia at a studio named K-Gem. In fact, a interesting side note, the keyboard player on that record was Jordan Rudess.
Really?
And it was the first record he ever did.
Really? Before he joined Dream Theater?
Way before.
Way before, yeah.
Yeah, so that was kind of fun. And so got to, play with Vinnie and Jordan, two monsters, And then we stayed in touch, We did some gigs.
Yeah.
Well, we toured a little bit. And then he wanted to take the next record in a more rocky direction. And we did Meltdown. And we did Meltdown. I introduced him to a friend of mine, Greg Smith, who I really like playing with Greg. I did a bunch of projects with him. And, Greg went on to play with Alice Cooper and Ted Nugent and a bunch of people. But so me, Greg, and Vinnie did that my second Vinnie record called Meltdown in New York, a buddy of mine's studio up in Millbrook, New York, called Millbrook Sound Studios. So, but Vinnie's he's a cool guy. We have kids about the same age. We actually met somewhere at the Hershey Park or something when our kids were really young. He's just he's such a cool guy. He's such a no big ego. He's
I think he's playing with UFO now. With UFO.
Yeah, he did for years.
Yeah.
I saw him with UFO. Actually, I saw him with UFO when Jason Bonham was playing drums.
Really?
Yeah. They played BB King's in New York.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. Yeah.
And then playing with Leslie, that was a real treat for me because he was one of my childhood heroes,
Yeah.
In New York, growing up the time I grew up, in the 60s and early 70s, the three biggest bands in New York were the Rascals, the Fudge, and the Vagrants. The Vagrants was Leslie's band.
Yeah.
And
that's before Mountain.
Before Mountain.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Way before. Well, yeah, before Mountain.
Yeah.
So the Vagrants really influenced the Fudge. They were doing those slowed down, dramatic versions of Stone songs. They used to do this version of Satisfaction, slowed down, kind of big, heavy drama.
Yeah.
And they were a big influence on the Fudge, and the Rascals, because see, those three bands were local. They were New York guys, of Jersey, Long Island. They were guys that you could run into in a music store. The English guys, they were from across the ocean. You couldn't, say hi to them.
Yeah.
But the New York guys, the Rascals played my high school in Brooklyn. They were just local cats, and so anyway, cutting to the chase, playing with Leslie, from him being a childhood hero as the guitarist in the Vagrants, and then Mountain, of course. Good Rats used to do some shows with Mountain here and there, and so that was a big thing. It was, and funny story is when we did some shows with me, Leslie, and Mark Mendoza, actually.
Yeah, Mark Mendoza played a little bit of bass for you guys, right?
Yeah, we did some shows with the three of us, and then I don't really remember what happened, but for some reason we did a Howard Stern television show together, and he had T.M. Stevens he wanted to play bass. Okay, so it was me, Leslie, T.M. Stevens, and Alan St. John. We were the Howard Stern TV band, and that show never was seen. That you can find it on YouTube, But through that, Leslie got this album deal and asked me if I'd do the record with him. I said, of course. And he didn't decide on a bass player, So we were just up in Millbrook jamming, playing. He had two songs. I played them both in a couple hours, and I go, "What's next?" He goes, we'll think about that tomorrow. Let's go have something to eat, So the next day, it's like, I got this riff. And I'm saying, oh boy, okay, so we have no kind of plan, right? So then it got down to like, who's playing bass? And he says, I don't know. Who do you think should play? And I said as a joke, not as a joke or as like a bucket list thing, I said, how about Jack Bruce? Great idea. He calls him up. This is 1987, right? So, at that time everyone had a phone machine, so he left a message on the phone machine. And about an hour later, Jack calls the studio and says, yeah, I just finished the tour. I'm in great shape. I can come this weekend.
That's about the same time when you were in Twisted, right?
Yeah, it was 87. I can't remember if it was right before that or right after that. I think it was right after the Twisted tour.
There is a video of you guys in Howard Stern where you play with Leslie, and Dee Snider walks out to play a song with you, to sing a song. I think Round and Round. I think.
Yes. It started real slow, and then we kicked into overdrive. Yeah. That was great. That was a good show. That was a great show. That was the best of the 5 Howard Stern shows because it was. I think the guests were Dee Snider and Joe Walsh.
Oh man, that's great, great guests.
And we did Rocky Mountain Way. That was fun doing that with Joe and TM on bass, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Very, very awesome. Okay, so how did you end up doing records with Celine Dion, for example, or with Mariah Carey? How did you do that?
Well, this is a fun story. Remember I told you when I walked into the studio when Twisted was doing drum machine demos?
Yeah.
Well, the guy that was programming that I basically got fired because I was making fun of his drum sounds, he wound up being this mega producer.
Whoa.
Yeah, Rick Wake, who... But so he's saying like, he had to explain to his boss, like, I don't know, this guy came in, made fun of the drum sounds, and the band left. So not only like he got canned as the programmer, but the band left the studio and we finished the demos at my place. Then we had to go back to the studio to mix, right?
Yeah.
And Rick loved what I did, and I earned his respect, even though I kind of got him kind of canned. He was just came from England to be, to be a rock star, to be, he came to just, I want to see what New York is like. And he started out by working at the studio, and they let him live there, and they gave him studio time. And Rick is a really talented musician, engineer, producer. He has big ears, he has a vision. So they gave him some studio time to produce local talent. So one of the local talents was this gal, what was her name? I'm trying to think of a real name. Wonderman. Anyway, Taylor Dane. Leslie Wonderman, who they renamed Taylor Dane, and Rick did Tell It to My Heart. And so that Rick exploded after that. And everybody wanted Rick Wake, all of the divas. That's how I got almost all of those records back in that time. Because Rick, I was his guy, because he loved what I was doing programming-wise, So I did the Mariah, the Celine, 2 Taylor Dane records, and wound up getting #1 singles. I mean, that didn't happen to me in rock and roll.
So you played the drums on those records,
all
right?
programming.
Oh, programmed drums, okay.
Taylor Dane, it was a hybrid. I played some pad kits with real cymbals. There was a little bit of a hybrid going on back in as technology advanced, But that was a lot of programming. At the same time that I was doing all the prog guitar players.
Was the programming of the drums paid off to you for you the same as you playing drums? For example, royalties. If you if someone pays royalties, pays exactly the same if you program them or no?
The way you get paid the program is exactly the way you get paid the drum.
Exactly the same. I mean, exactly the same.
You have a price. I'm doing a track. This is the drum track. Regardless of how they were done, But shortly after, like in the early 90s, by the time I put Beat Street together, I didn't want to hear about programming. I had my drums right there. And by that time, it wasn't as exciting as the very beginning when sampling became available. After about 5 or 6 years, every keyboard player I knew was programming great drum. They had all these libraries out there. When I was doing it, I made my own sounds. Everything, made my own hi-hats that played like a drummer, So combined computer smarts and drum smarts, and did the programming thing with more of a drummer head. But then it became very easy. Now, with loops and the virtual drum instruments that they have, the plugins, it's pretty easy to program a drum track.
Now it's pretty easy. Now it's very easy. But back in the day, there was without computers, there was only rhythm machines. Those rhythm machines, you remember them? That was very hard.
I really enjoyed the evolution of drum programming. I would say from mid 80s to early to mid 90s. It was pretty exciting because it was new. And then it became kind of cliche, So, but I wasn't really a good dancey drum programmer. I was more trying to make the machine stuff sound real. I was probably too much of a drummer. There were other people, my peers, guys like Jimmy Braylauer, who's really a producer. He's going to do what the song wants. I think when I was programming, I did what the drummer would do. You know what I'm saying? It was a little different attitude. I was still being a drummer, even though I was a programmer. But when I finished programming a track, I listened to that back. It didn't do it to me the way it does when you play a drum track. To me, it left me. I knew I did a good job. I knew I made the producer happy. I made some money. but it wasn't as rewarding by not even close to finishing a drum track, going into the control room, hearing it back, getting excited. That nothing replaces that.
Yeah, because that's a part of art. It's art, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember we did those Widowmaker records. The first Widowmaker record, we did songs, forget about no click, no headphones. We just went in there like we did when we were in our rehearsal studio and rocked out.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. You know what I love about the first Widowmaker record? The Widowmaker song. When you go into outro of the song, you remember the outro with the double bass? It's amazing.
Yeah, Breaking the Bar Line, it's called.
Yeah. Man, that's.
Who needs the one? Just keep playing.
Yeah, it's like a breakdown and like just keep playing and it's like a mute off. Yeah, it's fade out. It's amazing.
I'm going to go see Al in a couple of months. You know, Al is the music director for TSO.
Yeah, Al Petrelli, yeah.
I'm going to see one of his shows in December. We just
so he plays with Joel Hoekstra, right?
No, Joel does the East Coast.
Yeah, okay.
And Al does the West Coast.
Yeah. Joel was a guest on my show a few.
No kidding.
Yeah, a few episodes ago. Yeah.
He did some shows with me and Dee. Well, I used to, not too many years ago, play out in the summer with Dee Snider.
Oh, and
we did some Europe festivals. We did Estonia. We did, some stuff in the UK. But we would do some Twisted songs, some Widowmaker songs, and then some covers of metal songs that we all grew up with, And Joel played on some of those shows. I don't remember how many, but he was the guitar player.
It was maybe 10, 15 years ago or something like that.
No. It was more like 9 or 10.
Yeah, 10. Yeah.
9 or 10 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, I asked him about playing with Dee. He told me that he played, but I don't know the specifics when,
Yeah, it was about 10 years ago, and it was, just there's a market for the 80s bands to this day.
Yeah.
Funny, I was just talking to Fiona about that yesterday. We were talking about how in the Heartland there's all these casinos and state fairs, the Midwest in the States.
Yeah.
And all of the Warrant and Winger and Lita Ford, and they're all still out there doing it,
Yeah.
It's great, and it's I mean, a lot of bands don't have their original members and whatnot, but Winger still has Reb and Rod, So there is a scene out there, and it was fun to do that, because when I was doing those shows 9 and 10 years ago with Dee, we would run into all these old friends, like the guys from Winger. They're really good friends of ours.
Yeah. I think some of the Winger guys were also connected with the Love Is for Suckers record, right? Someone played on.
Yeah, what happened is for the second Fiona record, we were auditioning guitar players to go into the studio with us. And the guy we wound up, me and Donnie, the bass player, and the guy we ended up with was Red Beach.
Yeah.
So we brought him in and introduced him to Bo. He played on that Fiona record, and then his relationship with Bo, and Bo was also very tight with Kip. That's how Winger started.
Yeah.
Basically, it was Kip and Reb, but Reb played on Fiona's second record, and he also played on Love Is for Suckers.
Yeah, and I think Kip sang some backing vocals, right, on Love Is for Suckers?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
It all comes from the producer, The producer is going to get people he's comfortable with to make a record,
Yeah.
I think sometimes producers go a little bit too far and they make it their record rather than the band's record,
Yeah.
Funny thing is that, I'm sure the guys remember this, but when we we had so many meetings before we recorded this record, Love is for Suckers. And one of the producers that was brought up was, oh man, I'm spacing out. He produced Rick Rubin. At the time, all he had was Beastie Boys.
Yeah.
And, they thought it was a joke like that. But really, the Beastie Boys guy, his name was brought up. He would have been amazing for the band because he would have made us just go in there and play like a metal band.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
But, Bo was more into, a more polished thing,
Yeah.
That's why when he heard the demos, they had all that polish, the drum machine, the big drum sounds and all that.
Yeah, Bo later on was, I think, Warrant were with Bo, right? The band Warrant, Warrant.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he did Warrant.
Yeah, he did Warrant. So they are like polished, pretty much polished band. Yeah.
So I thought he was going to be great for Fiona because we love the Rat records. They sounded fantastic,
Yeah.
But he took Fiona in a more pop direction. Like if you listen to Fiona's first and second record, Night and Day, we started out as a rock band, but then they got her into a more polished pop.
Yeah.
So didn't work.
What do you think about the music industry today? Is there an industry of releasing records? Is it paying off or no?
I'm so removed from it, drumming to me and the music industry, to me it's a hobby. I love music. I play the drums every day.
Yeah.
I love playing, but the thought of doing what we did back then, it doesn't exist. Tour support, it doesn't exist. You tour if you have a lot of money and you're going to make a lot of money. But, as far as how to do it on a grassroots way, it's kind of tough. On the other hand, thinking about when I grew up, you had to have a record deal to make a record. Nowadays, you have good music. Most people can record or at least hire somebody to record them down their basement and come up with a pretty good product. And you can actually, sell your product at gigs and do that, So in that way, I like what's going on the grassroots level. But it's a total different industry, as you know.
Yes.
Totally different.
Yeah. What kind of drums do you usually like now? I see Drum Works.
Yeah, Drum Workshop. Drum Workshop. That kit is 21 years old.
Really?
I got that kit in 03. From 1978 to 2003, 25 years, I endorsed Premier.
So you were...
And before Premier, I was Ludwig, Ringo, my old Ringo kit.
Yeah.
And then I got a Premier endorsement in 78 and played Premier for 25 years, and then went to DW. I love, this kit is the best kit I ever had. It's a beautiful kit.
I have two Premiers, one Premier Olympia and one Premier Cabria. You know them?
What's
Olympia.
the second one?
Premier Cabria.
Oh, Cabria. Yeah.
Premier Cabria and Premier Olympia. Yeah.
Olympia is an old one, right?
Yeah, an old one. Yeah.
Wow. My favorite Premiers were the Soundwave. They reduced the shell diameter just a little bit, and the head had a little more overhang. The toms had more of a timpani kind of, if you like that big full sound.
Yeah.
These drums are like that.
Yeah.
So Soundwave, I think I had Resonator kicks and Soundwave toms. I have two kits like that in storage that I used in the 80s.
You like more double two basses or you like more double pedal?
Two basses.
Two basses.
I don't like double pedal. I use double pedal when I have to, But I'm funny. I everybody was moving to double pedal. So I at the time I think my premier setup was Janista. Because I like the birch sound and the reduced shell diameter better than the Signia, if you remember the Signia.
Signia, yeah.
From before Janista. And I ordered a 24, even though I started playing 22s because I was doing children's television and all that, 24 was a little big.
Yeah.
So I ordered a 24 and I was going to play using a double pedal. I started working through the material because they sent me the material with a drum machine, and I replaced the drum machine, came up with my own parts, and I couldn't play on the double pedal. I was so used to playing two bass drums. So I replaced the 24 and double pedal with two 22s.
Uh-huh.
So that I mean, like anything else, if I played with a double pedal every day for a month, it would probably be, just fine. But like my concept of double bass is always to move air, I mean, I don't play lightning fast, like nowadays you hear things like 250 BPM double bass. Yeah, I'm like half that speed, but I like to move air, and you move more air like being behind two bass drums,
Yeah, if you're with a pedal, you cut the first one. Yeah,
you do, because the head's getting hammered.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's two different heads, each note has a longer sound.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like the way it makes me feel behind the kit.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it.
But I mean, to each his own. I know many good friends of mine play double pedal and they love it, And
which was the first one that you said a lot of speed? It was it the painkiller, Judas Priest Painkiller, the Scott Travis? He was like the first one that was like top speed.
You're very low in volume. I'm sorry.
Travis Scott from Judas Priest, remember?
Oh, Travis Scott, yeah.
Yeah, the Painkiller intro. That was the first one that I heard. That was the most best thing that I heard on double pedal,
Oh, he plays double pedal?
Yeah. No, double drums, I don't know.
He plays double bass, doesn't he?
Double bass.
I think he does.
Maybe on the Painkiller song, yeah.
You know what? I have to go listen to it again now.
Oh man,
I haven't heard it in forever. But yeah, I mean, who knows? If I heard it, I would know if it was triggers, if it was bass drums. You can kind of tell. But I haven't heard that in so long. He's a great drummer.
Great drummer. When did Triggers came out into production? The Triggers
in the 80s.
In the 80s?
Well, in the mid 80s, what happened is the rock drummers, like disco was coming in, and you shook the house with the bass drum, and so the rock drummers were saying like, I want my drums to sound like that, Well, if they're going to sound like that, those are samples, and you got to simplify your playing. So what happened in the mid 80s, and to get that big sound, people were using triggers. And playing simpler, and that became a thing, everyone was using triggers on their drums.
Wow, I thought it was
they were replacing it after the fact, which I used to do.
Yeah.
I used to get hired to do that. I had a box called an F16 4-rat sampler, and it used to trigger in microseconds. So you put the kick drum signal through it, and it spit it right out in practically real time onto the tape, So that's a lot of what you heard in those days. Most drummers had triggered drums.
Yeah, I thought it was a later invention, like 2000, but
no triggers. People were using sample drums in the 80s. A lot of the big 80s bands, I'm sure Motley, and I have to listen to those records again, but in that era, triggers were big. Yeah. Everybody wanted that huge drum sound. It was Mutt Lange with the programmed drums and Def Leppard. Those drums are huge.
Yeah.
But guess what? That's not what the drum sounds like. That's like sample with effects, and so-
Hysteria. The album Hysteria is programmed. Yeah. Def Leppard. Yeah.
But that, I think that between dance records and what Mutt Lange was doing inspired that whole sample thing, and everybody was doing it.
But a lot of legendary records and concerts came out from that,
Yeah.
Okay, Joe, thank you for this show. Thank you for everything. It was a great conversation for me.
You really know your stuff.
Yeah, I know a lot of music. Yeah, a lot of music. Yeah.
I can tell you're passionate about it as well.
I am. Thank you. That's a compliment. That's a huge compliment. You are one of my.
I sensed it from the questions you asked, from your knowledge of my career, and I mean, you love what you do, and doing these. Have you been doing these for a long time, or is it something you got into?
No, this is like for 1 year maybe. Yeah, but I know music, a lot. I like to listen. I like the careers of my musical idols. We are one of my drum idols because I am a drummer. You and AJ Pero, of course.
Great.
So
I love AJ.
Yeah. So
He's
thank
a great
you.
guy.
Of course, yeah. I met him 3 times, and I hope to meet you someday.
Sounds good. All right, man. Real pleasure.
It was a pleasure of mine. Thank you. Thank you, Joe.